Welcome everyone to our webinar today. My name is Meg LePage. I'm a partner in the employment group at Pierce Atwood. And I'm joined by two of my partners, Katy Rand, who's also in our Portland office, and Suzanne King, who splits her time between our Boston office and our Portsmouth, New Hampshire offices. We're very pleased to have all of you here in attendance to join us for our presentation called Hindsight is 2020. Lessons learned from the first 8 months of the pandemic. If you had told me back in March that we'd be putting on a seminar on October 21st, talking about the first 8 months of the pandemic, I would have said you were crazy. I didn't expect the pandemic to last more than 8 weeks, let alone 8 months. But we're here with no clear end in sight, and we're going to talk about what we've learned from that experience. I know that one thing is true, that whenever I think of the year 2020, I'll never think of it and not think of COVID-19. They're inextricably intertwined in my mind. So we have about 120 people who registered for this seminar joining us virtually. Some of you are regulars to our breakfast programs that we used to put on in person. And others are joining us for the first time, but I want to welcome all of you. I'm going to do some brief introductions of each of our 4 panelists, guest panelists, and then Katy, Suzanne, and I are going to begin the discussion about where we've been and what we've learned from this. You are invited to pose questions to the panelists, and you can do that through the Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen. And we'll be watching for those periodically. We'll chime in with some of your questions. Okay. Now for the introductions. In alphabetical order, our first guest panelist is Jennifer Harnish, Director of Human Resources at Baker Newman Noyes. Jennifer has been at Baker Newman Noyes since 2011. She's the Director of Human Resources and works in their operations division. Before joining BNN, Jennifer worked in human resources for 8 years at an international food retailer. She supports all 5 office locations at her organization, leading the development of strategic HR initiatives related to staffing, retention, diversity, organizational development, and performance management. Paul Nightingale is the Senior Vice President and General Counsel of Hood. He's responsible for the oversight of all aspects of H.B. Hood's legal affairs, including corporate governance, business acquisitions and divestitures, intellectual property protection, litigation management, and legal and regulatory compliance. He's also chair of the company's retirement planning committee. Paul has the honorable distinction of having graduated from the University of Michigan School of Law, which I also attended. He was after me, in case you're wondering.
Not too much. Not too much.
Teresa Nizza is the Chief Human Resource Officer of Martins Point Healthcare. As the Chief Human Resource, Teresa is responsible for the overall stewardship of people and culture at Martins Point. In addition to her human resources leadership responsibilities, she also leads the Martins Point Executive Office Administration and the Martins Point Management System team focused on performance process improvement. In her spare time, Teresa is pursuing a PhD at Boston University. Cathy Witherspoon is here with us from Boyne Resorts. Some of you know the Sugarloaf and Sunday River and perhaps Loon Mountain resorts. There are several others. She has or leads the development over the company's 10,000 plus team members. They're spread across North America, including British Columbia. She's in charge of all aspects of health, human resources, including health coverage negotiations, employee-related legal matters, and leadership training. During the past year, Cathy spent the winter working at Boyne Mountain's Big Sky, Montana resort. When they shut down, she retreated to her Florida home, where she spent the lockdown, and then she went and spent part of the summer at Wells Beach, and now she's back up in the Sugarloaf area. So she makes it around. So with those introductions, we're going to start, and I'm going to ask each of you, I'm going to do it in reverse alphabetical order, if I can get that right, and to have each of you talk briefly about your organization and the size of it, the type of employees you have, and what kind of combinations of working from home, working in the office or the plant, and maybe not working that you've had during the pandemic. So I'm going to start with Cathy.
Okay, and I'm going to turn off my video because I do not have good internet at my house today, maybe because it's raining, not sure. So, but it seems to work better with just the voice and not the video. We're a hospitality business. Boyne Resorts started in Michigan, Boyne, Michigan. And as Meg said, we're spread across the country. We're a ski and golf resort, and we have retail shops throughout Michigan as well, and also at each resort. In our high season, which would be winter season, we have 12,000 employees. We're in 7 states. We're in Maine, New Hampshire, Michigan, Tennessee, Utah, Montana, Washington State, and Vancouver, British Columbia, Vancouver, Canada. The Tennessee is called the Gatlinburg Skylift, and it's literally a chairlift that goes up. And we also have the largest sky bridge that you can walk across in North America. So that's one of our new features. We have a wide range of positions. We're like little cities, some of our resorts, where we have everything from vehicle maintenance to lodging to the on mountain or golf operations. So we have workers, frontline workers, housekeepers, lift attendants, all the way to senior teams at each resort. And then we have a corporate C-suite executive team that oversees all the resorts. We have a small percentage of people that are working from home. When we first shut down, we closed all resorts, all 10 resorts on March 15th. And we had massive layoffs where we laid everybody off, our seasonal people. We probably laid close to 9,000 people off in 24 hours. It was a tough March. Typically our seasonal people do get laid off, but that was about a month and a half earlier than the norm. So we had many people laid off. We started our summer operations, but as I said, we don't have many of our jobs that can work from home. Most of them are at the resorts, and now we are pretty much up and running. So, and we just finished summer operations at some of our resorts, and we're going to start our winter operations here in a couple months, in a month, probably a month. It's a month.
Great.
Thank you.
Teresa?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. We live in the healthcare world here at Martins Point. We have about 900 employees. Most of them are in Maine, yet we do have an office in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. So we have employees in New Hampshire and some in New York and a few scattered in other states, but primarily in Maine. We do have both a delivery system and a health plan. And what that means is our delivery system is a non-hospital-based independent primary care organization. So we have 7 sites in which patients have primary care providers. So those include both clinicians, clinical support, folks in operations, administration, a contact center, so folks on the phone, so front lines to leaders and clinicians. The majority of these folks have stayed on site during the pandemic. We do have a health plan, which both provides sales and service for insurance products. So we have a customer base of military population. We have a contract with the Department of Defense that we've had for more than 25 years. We also have a Generations Advantage product that serves the Medicare population. And then we also provide membership and services to other folks in the development phase of new products. So we think about health plan, we think about sales and service, claims, enrollment, folks that respond to our members on the phone, medical administration, health management staff. So those individuals primarily have been remote since mid-March, along with our shared services group. So both our human resources, IT, legal and compliance, support services. So most of our shared services have been remote as well. So pre-COVID, we had approximately 70 employees that worked remotely on an average ongoing basis. Since the pandemic, we have approximately 450 employees that are remote currently.
Thank you. Paul.
Hi, everyone. I think most of you know who Hood is. At least you probably have our products in your refrigerator somewhere or your freezer. We're a dairy products company, and we make non-dairy products as well. We're into sort of the alternative dairy space as well as dairy. We have 13 processing plants located primarily in the Northeast, all the New England states except Rhode Island and in New York State. We have plants in Virginia and in California, and also some in upstate New York that sell products on a nationwide basis. We have a number of products that we produce and sell throughout the country. The most prominent ones are lactate, lactose-reduced milk, as well as Blue Diamond Almond Breeze brand almond milk. We have some others as well, but those are the main ones that drive our national business. We have about 3,000 employees total. Most of them work in our plants or in our distribution operations, driving trucks around. You see them on the highway. We do have, probably a couple hundred people in sales who work, many of them out of their homes or out of Linfield, Mass, where our headquarters is. And then we have probably 120 plus, office workers here in Linfield. And we have an R&D operation in Wilmington, Massachusetts, that has probably 30 to 40 people in it. Most of the folks in the offices are home now, working remotely to the extent that they can. We do have, the office is open to some people, but it's a pretty, I'm here today actually in our offices, and it's pretty sparsely attended. There are probably less than 20% of the normal population is in the office here. We're an essential business as a food and beverage manufacturer. So we didn't miss a beat. We kept operating through COVID when it started. We sent everybody home to work remotely who could, but our plants certainly have kept running and continue to run to this day. And, we're one of the sectors that's been actually that COVID has really helped our business. People are staying at home, they're buying food from grocery stores as opposed to going out to eat or doing other things. And so, our sales are actually way up this year over what they've been. So we've been lucky in that regard. We have paid a premium wage to our plant workers. They got an extra $3 an hour during the COVID crisis because in recognition of the stress and uncertainty that everyone has to work under these conditions. So that's pretty much who Hood is and what we've done. And I've been able to work, I have a small legal group. There are 3 lawyers, paralegal, and an admin. And most of us have been working at home. We've been working pretty effectively, I would say, at home. I can do probably 95% of what I need to do there. And so fortunately, we've been able to manage through that.
Thank you, Paul. Jennifer?
Hi. So Baker Newman Noyes is a public accounting firm. We have 5 offices across Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. We have about 280 employees. And in mid-March, like the rest of you, most of our employees were able to move home with work at home setups and have continued to be at home. And so in our last survey, we have about 35% of people who are considered essential across those 5 offices have wanted to come back, and we've made that possible for them with safety precautions. And then the rest of the group really prefers working at home. And so because of the work that we do, we have made that possible, and our employees are able to have the choice. In the event they want to come in, they are able to, but most people, they prefer staying at home.
Do you foresee changing that choice option in the foreseeable future?
We continue to survey our employees for their preference, and how they're feeling about coming into the office. Our employees have lots of other responsibilities now at home. And so if they can continue to work at home, then, that works for us as an employer. And I think as we all are wondering, how long is this going to go on for, will determine what office space and attendance in offices will look like.
Thanks. Suzanne.
So I hope everyone can hear me. So one of the things that we thought would be useful about gathering this group of panelists is to sort of share some common experiences and maybe share some solutions that people have had. So we want to start by asking about challenges. And, there'll be other questions. This won't be all negative. There'll be other questions where we can talk about some of the silver linings and some of the more positive things. But to kick us off here, what have been your greatest challenges, or what has been the greatest challenge as you've navigated these last 8 months? And how have you responded to it? And Paul, let's start with you.
Well, I think our experience has been the biggest challenge that we have faced, I think, is our employee off-work behavior. By far, we track the numbers of cases that we have, and we've had a total of, I can't remember the total now, but we've had probably, multiple hundred people we've had to quarantine for various different reasons. We've only had 21 employees actually test positive for COVID-19. So most of them are just precautionary quarantines, but most of them are driven by stupid decisions people make out of work. And we can't really control that other than to say to people, please don't do this. And the main thing we've started to do initially when we went out, we were paying everybody who had to quarantine no matter what, for whatever reason. We've altered that practice now, and we will certainly pay people who are forced to quarantine through no fault of their own due to things that relate to work exposures or other things like that. But if people are going to go to Vegas and try to go to a casino, or they're going to go, engage in, behaviors where they're exposed to a lot of people on the weekends at a barbecue, we're not going to pay people to quarantine under those circumstances. So that's kind of the way we've managed that challenge.
Did you actually put that into a policy?
We did for sure.
Cool.
And I should point out that Hood is not covered by the FFCRA, and so their flexibility around not paying during a quarantine is somewhat different than folks who are covered by FFCRA. So I just want to make sure that people don't, who are covered, don't take that good idea and run with it.
Thank you, Suzanne.
So Jennifer, how about you? What has been your greatest challenge, and how have you dealt with it?
Sure, thanks, Suzanne. It's culture. We are so used to working side by side, working in pods, working on client issues, that has been really hard. It's something that we didn't realize was such a challenge until we didn't have that side by side experience. We hire many interns and many new staff every year, and trying to introduce them to the culture, introduce them to our open door, getting to build those relationships, which is such an important part of our business, not only internal relationships with colleagues, but with our clients. And that's a whole new skill set that we had to train and talk a lot about. Culture for every business is so important for recruiting and retention. And how do you recreate that in a virtual environment that feels real, right? And genuine, not forced. And so, what comes with that then are people, some of our employees are kind of shy about having to call someone virtually, so it seems like every little contact now is formal, where before you could just swing by someone's office and say, hey, do you have a minute? And then also with that, just walking down the hall, sometimes you are reminded of something that was due, or you needed to get back to someone. And So efficiency is dropping off just because we don't see our colleagues every day. So I know that, you know, for companies who have worked in a virtual environment, you've got some of this figured out. But for those of us that have not been, it's been a real challenge.
Have you taken any steps to address that, Jennifer? Any technology or other ways that you've tried to build that camaraderie or collaboration?
We have. So we had a new system put in, Starleaf, which is virtual conferencing. We added Teams, Microsoft Teams, to be able to connect. And so with that, just with any of those new platforms, it's the training and getting comfortable using them. And then socially, you know, we have started a parent group to be able to bring parents together around the topics that are challenging to them. Each of our pods get together, or our small groups of employees get together for social hours to be able to connect, you know, not necessarily just on work types of issues. So, and then virtual town halls by our managing partner. And again, using all of our new technology, he's doing more videos and just different ways to stay connected formally and informally.
Well, and I guess since it looks like this is continuing, at least for the coming months, they'll have plenty of time to practice with these new these new platforms. So that's good. How about you, Cathy? What have been the biggest challenges? I hope you didn't have anything more challenging than laying off 9,000 people in 24 hours, but has there been anything else that you've had to deal with that you would consider a big challenge?
Well, trying to get them to come back to work, I would say. So after we laid everybody off and everybody was on unemployment, it was a challenge to convince people that it was safe to come back to work and that they can come back to work in our environment, and we were going to follow all the protocols. And then also, as I said, dealing with the unemployment, people making more money staying home. So it was difficult for us. We were actually short-staffed all summer in several of our areas because we couldn't get people. And then, you know, there's other things, like the other thing that's been hugely challenging for us is just disseminating the CDC and the health guidelines. We're being in all different states. If we did have someone come up with COVID, what was the right move? How did we work it? How did we do the contact tracing? Who had to quarantine? Who didn't have to quarantine? And we just felt like health department, CDC, the rules kept changing as we were going. And it's just still very difficult to navigate. And so we're still working on that. And as Paul was saying, you know, when do you pay people and when do you not pay people for quarantining? And if they're doing foolish behavior, how do you handle that? We're about to bring on all of our seasonal people again, and knowing that we won't be under the FFRCA, we'll be exempt from that, but what's the right thing to do? So those are things that we're still struggling with. And then the other big one is having available testing. Our states vary, so we want to be able to, if we have a situation, have some rapid testing and get testing and really understand quickly where we're at. And that also has been really scattered and varying from state to state. So,
well, and Cathy, I can just underscore, staying on top of the state requirements, even something like just travel requirements, they vary by state. There's not just little variations, there's fundamental differences in how they look at it. And everyone on this panel is a multi-state employer, and that is challenging. We have an associate that's sort of dedicated to staying on top of just New England, and that keeps her busy. But once you branch out beyond New England, it gets even more complicated. So I just have to underscore that the lack of a national, you know, unified way of approaching this continues to be a challenge for a lot of our clients. How about you, Teresa? Have you had any particular challenges that you can share, and how you've managed to respond to them?
Sure, Suzanne. And first I want to echo all of my colleagues' challenges. We've experienced very similar challenges. And as I think about our greatest challenge, from a big picture perspective, was really about keeping our employees safe and whole. And how could we do that? We made a commitment early on not to furlough or lay off any employees. You know, living into that challenge becomes yet another issue. You know, when you think about those 450 remote workers, Even just the idea, practically speaking, of taking employees who are on site, moving them into a remote worker category meant that we had to ensure that they all had equipment, they all had laptops, they had monitors. And at that time, when we were even trying to, just from a practical perspective, order those laptops, you only could get 20 at a time. So if you have over 400 people and you need to get laptops and you make the commitment to do remote work, then you have to make sure they get equipment. Then you also have to make sure that not only do they have the equipment, but on an ongoing basis, what about ergonomics? You know, are they safe? Are they able to have the equipment that they need? We did end up providing a stipend to employees of $400 to get set up at home. That's beyond, you know, their laptops and mouse and keyboard. But when you think about that, that was a major effort, a big challenge. Financially, psychologically, and then how do people go about doing their work at home? And when you think about those individuals that stayed on site, about the other half of our population who are here providing care to our patients, that was a whole other challenge, right? And I think what we heard from employees, and one of the biggest challenges we had were issues around daycare, around school, around scheduling, because all of a sudden people had different schedules. They weren't able to work the same hours, or they had to provide support to remote schoolings and take care of young children at home. So, you know, their schedules became really very problematic. How do you provide patient care? How do you make sure clinicians and clinical support are on site providing that care? All the while recognizing some of those employees needed to be at home for a portion of their day. So a lot of challenges, honestly, around scheduling. And as we think about people's fear of actually coming into work, right? And that is by no means did we underestimate or want to provide support to those folks who were considered essential employees or ones that really needed to be on site, yet they were afraid to come on site. And how do you deal with those? You know, practically speaking, in the delivery system, we had issues around supplies. We didn't have enough masks. We didn't have enough gloves to be able to provide safety and support to both our employees as well as patients. So workspace also became an issue. We had to create modifications to workspace in our delivery system to make sure that people had an appropriate distance from each other. So that was a constant iteration. We also had a lot of changes to workflow and people's actual work. So we set up testing tents, which we didn't have before, acute respiratory clinics, which we didn't have before, telehealth, and that changed people's work. So when you think about what an employee is you know, used to doing and the skills that they have necessary to support all of these additional both accountabilities, responsibilities. So adaptation to workflow and the type of work that they did became a real challenge as well.
I'm going to turn it over to Katy in just a minute for our next question, but we have some great participation from the audience, a couple quick questions to throw in. And I'm going to send this one to you, Cathy, because it's a question about onboarding. Do you have any, it sounds like you've had to hire a bunch of your whole summer crew in the world of the pandemic. Any particular tips or anything that you did differently because of needing to hire folks during the pandemic, or was it pretty much the same?
No, we did a lot. We had developed a training that was just for COVID protocols, and we worked very hard and had everybody come in and train them all on so that they would feel comfortable to feel safe at work, because that was a big deal. Is it going to be safe, especially for people like our housekeepers? So we developed a back to work pledge that we had everybody sign prior to coming, and making sure that they understood that the workplace was going to be different. And then we had everybody trained, and we worked very hard to make sure that they felt safe. Other than that, we did our regular, but that was primary, is just to make sure people felt safe in the work environment.
Okay, great. And then one more question I'll just send around to everybody. This will be a really quick answer. Someone asks about how long are you gonna, for your employees that can work remotely, do you have an end date at this point? Or you know, do you have a January 1st or through February 15th, or have you sort of established a schedule or a duration of the remote work? Paul, you want to start?
We have right now, we're supposedly going to try to reopen beginning December 1st, but every 30 days we keep rolling it back. My management wants our people here. They don't want people at home. So we're ultimately going to be bringing everyone back when we can. It's a question of when. My prediction is sometime next year, probably in the late spring, but we'll see.
Jennifer, how about you guys? Do you have a set time frame?
Yeah, so we came out with the end of the year, hoping to have people come back at the beginning of January, but kind of like Paul, we're waiting to see what the environment is like in each of our geographies. And if we have to push that, we will push that. You know, I think we have realized that our firm can work at home and be as efficient and still serving our clients and getting everything that we need to get done. So there's a sense that if we have to keep extending it to keep our employees safe, we will continue to do that.
And how about you, Teresa? Do you have I mean, I guess your healthcare side of things, delivery side is already back, but how about the rest of your remote workforce? Do you have any particular duration in mind, or?
Yeah, we just made a decision. We were similar to Paul, and that we had somewhat rolling, and we were did a voluntary as well. But we just made a decision a couple of days ago and announced it at a management team meeting this morning that it would be the end of June.
Wow.
So rather than have employees who continue to ask us and have all these rolling dates and all the anxiety that was causing for folks, especially around childcare issues, remote schooling, scheduling. So we just made that decision and we'll roll out to the remainder of our employees sometime today. So it'll coincide with the end of the school year.
I bet you'll get great feedback about that. That does sort of take the pressure off for folks and give them a chance to plan, although it's a pretty big commitment also. And
Yes.
How about you, Cathy? Have you had any decision? Do you have a particular date in mind of bringing your remote workforce back?
No, actually, I think the people that are working from home, we're being very flexible. And if it's working for them, to my knowledge, I don't think we have any real set deadline. If it's working, it might be an indefinite thing. Like I said, we don't have a lot of work from home jobs, but the ones that we do have, I haven't heard that anybody's really put forth a deadline as to when they have to come back. If it's working, we're going to let it go.
That's sort of a good springboard for my question, because it highlights that, you know, we have this work at home population that we're all having to be sort of flexible about and evolving expectations around when they'll return to work. But at the same time, for most, but not all of you, perhaps not Baker Newman, but for most, there's been at least some contingent that has had to work from the beginning, or that certainly has had to open as you reopen, whether it's, you know, maintaining properties or manufacturing or delivering healthcare. And so I'm wondering whether there's been a tension between those who have had to go into work to do their job and those who've had this flexibility extended to them. And if so, how you've managed that. Paul?
I have not really seen that tension. Now I'm, you know, in a corporate office in Linfield. I'm not at our plants. And so I don't know, you know, what the blue collar workers are thinking, but you know, I think we've gone out of our way to make the place safe, and we've got all sorts of protocols everywhere. So, you know, you can't walk, you know, 2 feet without a hand sanitizer in your face and other things like that. So I think we've done that. We, as I indicated earlier, we've increased pay for people during this period, the you know, line workers during this period. And you know, they don't even know. I'm sure a lot of them don't even know or are unaware of what the corporate folks are doing, because they don't really know on a daily basis anyway. The biggest thing is that we can't travel. It's hard to travel. So, you know, they're used to seeing people come through from corporate, and we are doing much less of that than we have in the past. But I would say that, you know, I have not heard word of any tension. There's some sort of subtle pressure put on people like me and the senior leadership to show our face in the office on a regular basis. You know, our ownership believes that it's important to set that tone. So we've had a number of us come in, you know, especially in the last couple of months. And I'm going to be committed to coming in every couple of days now going forward. And so we'll see how that works. But so far, so good.
Yeah, and the hazard pay, you see a lot of employers doing that, and that has to help. And it does make sense to me that the tension is going to arise more often when there's sort of mingling between those who have to work in the office and that sort of thing. Teresa, are you experiencing those challenges at Martin's Point?
Yeah, it's probably, less than what I thought. But here's what I would say. It's interesting when those clinicians and support staff that are servicing patients, I mean, that is, so the mission and purpose driven, they know when they enter into that profession that is their work, as opposed to those folks who are on the health plan side. Having said that, we've heard about issues of fairness. For instance, we heard you gave employees who are working at home $400 stipend. What about us? That $400 stipend was to buy a chair or a desk or something to help to support them at home. And I think we heard a little bit about, and continue to hear this to some degree, that somehow the employees who are at home working remotely are organizing their closets, or they're mowing the lawn, or that somehow it's fun and it's easy to be at home. And what we're hearing from employees is it's not. It's remote school. It's I'm helping my child much more than if they were in school. I'm trying to get my work done. I'm having a lot of stress. So it's been interesting. I will say that, one of the things that we've tried to do, there are a few of us here that are on site, senior leaders. So we go down to the testing tents. We try to show our support to the employees who are there. We provide lunches to them. We've been giving them some swag. So we've really tried to support them in a variety of different ways. We've been increasing communications with them. We've tried to ensure thank you notes from all the senior leaders. So a lot of individualized things to their homes. We actually sent kits to all of our employees' homes, actually, that had 2 masks with our logo, hand sanitizer, a thermometer, and a stress ball. So we've tried to acknowledge in a variety of different ways the importance and the thanks and gratitude of the work that they're doing. So that certainly has helped in a lot of ways, but think about it, those folks that are on site also, many of them have children. They also have some of the same issues. So it is really a challenge. I think it's, for us, gratitude. How do we acknowledge the work they're doing? The issue of hazard pay has been an interesting one, Katy, because we're not providing hazard pay. We have been asked that question, not by a large percentage of the population, but by some. Our leader, our CEO, believes that everyone would fall into that category, not simply the people that are on site. So he has a strong philosophical stance on that, and we've not provided any type of hazard pay.
Well, hazard pay is really just one. I think what I'm hearing from you, the point is sort of recognizing that we're thankful for the work you're doing, and we know that you're sacrificing. That kind of recognition can in some ways go as far as hazard pay. Cathy, do you have anything different to add? And are you experiencing this? Is this acute?
We experienced it early on when we first brought people back, but and we've just, like I said, being true to our protocols and making sure that we have a safe work environment. But people have got it. Some people wanted to come back to work because it was harder to be home. So I agree with Teresa that some people would say, we're happy to be back in the office. But no, I think I did what most people said.
Great.
Same.
So we've touched on my next question a little bit, but I want to focus on it a little bit more. And that is, what has been the greatest pushback that you've gotten from employees, either following your protocols or wanting a different arrangement in terms of work from home and so forth? Paul, you touched on it a little bit when you talked about people wanting to go to Las Vegas for the weekend. Any other kind of pushbacks in terms of employee resistance?
I don't think we're not experiencing resistance to the protocols and protections we put in place internally. I think when people are at work, they've been really good about complying with masks and social distancing and all the other things that we have to do. So I would say that, no, it really is the sort of personal freedom issue. And it's funny, we don't hear about it too much up here in New England. It mostly is in our Winchester, Virginia plant. So there's definitely a cultural element of being in the South and of being, nobody's going to tell me what I can do on my weekend kind of attitude. And so that's the kind of thing that we've had to face down there. It's not, in California, it's been more like New England. We haven't had, really any issues with people, engaging in those kind of behaviors. But so no, I would think I've been pleasantly surprised at how people have fallen into line and have accepted the need to be safe at work and to, work carefully and to not take unnecessary risks or, push back against the rules we've set up to make sure that people can go home safely.
I have heard from some clients that they get pushback from employees about wearing masks and saying that it should, we shouldn't mandate it. They should have the freedom to decide whether or not to wear it. Has anyone here had that kind of pushback? And if so, how have you dealt with it? Teresa, you had that?
We just started, I guess what you would call mandatory masking in the past couple of days. So in our delivery system, it had been in place. It was a requirement, but what we were finding was a lot of people were taking off the mask. They were, not properly wearing the mask. So we got a lot of complaints from patients who are saying, gosh, I'm here, I'm masked. And sometimes we see folks that don't have them and are not wearing them properly. So there was that. We also, as we have some of our health plan employees that chose to voluntarily come back, and some of those shared services folks, while there are not a lot that are on site, we decided to make the decision that across the board, anyone coming into the office would have to do a number of things. And one would be to wear a mask all day, unless you're in an office with a closed door, your own or some other space. So it's only been in effect for a couple of days. Most of the pushback we've really received are from folks who are on the phone all day. So we have a call center in our delivery system. We have people on the phone in our, our mail order pharmacy, as well as our health plan. So for them to wear a mask all day long, I think we'll see how that goes. So far, we're hearing issues around people having some anxiety with it, and just as a personal choice would prefer not to wear it. But we'll see as time goes on. It's only been a couple of days.
So Cathy, you have employees in all different parts of the country. Have you gotten any pushback on protocols, masks?
Well, I'd like to say no, but yeah, we had some of all of the above in the summer, and it took us a while. We started making everybody have mandatory masks in all public areas, I think in early July. And that took us a while to get everybody sort of in that habit. I would say probably some of the frontline managers and supervisors would have more information on this than I do, but I know that, you'd have people pulling their mask down below their nose so they think they have the mask on, but they really don't. So we had to deal with all that, like what's an appropriate way to wear the mask. But I was happy to, one of my first trips, I went to Michigan in September and went into one of our big hotels, and I was so impressed as to what a protocol. Everybody wore their mask all the time. There just didn't seem to be any pushback. So the other thing that we do is we started doing a health check every day. And so every person gets a health check. They come in, we're taking their temperature and we're asking them those health questions. And I think in the beginning, once again, people thought that was just kind of stupid, or what are we doing this for? And now it's once again, it's become routine. It's becoming a habit. And I think people are much more amenable to it. And I also think that we've had a couple of situations where people have gotten COVID at a couple of our resorts, but it has not spread. It's been very minimal. And we really are pushing that out, like, great job, everyone, you're wearing your mask. We had one positive case or 2 positive cases, but nobody else got it. So keep following the protocols, and we keep pushing that information out. And I think people are starting to understand that right now it's our way of life and it's what we do. So it's gotten a lot better.
And Jennifer, anything to add?
Sure. I was just going to add that, everyone comes to this from their own personal values and place. And so initially, our leadership made the decision to have more strict protocols in place because it would be easier to remove them as we went and as we learned more from the CDC and just about what this virus is. And so we started out right off the bat with essential people only in the office. And I think the pushback is as people evolved personally, right, and accepting that this is going to be our way of life. So if I look forward now, we don't have any pushback, but initially, sure, because there was a lot of question and there was a lot of unknown. And like Teresa said, we have people who were just uncomfortable knowing they had to wear a mask all day. So we recently have restructured our cube space. So if you need to come in and you're in a cube, you do not have to wear your mask in the cube. We've been able to move many people who had a cube as an office space into an office with a door because we have so few people in our offices. So that allows people to come in, be comfortable while they're working, and also know that they're very safe while they're here. So I think it was just adjusting to the new rules of that we had to put in place to keep everyone safe.
Great. So Suzanne, I think you're up next, but I was wondering if there were any questions that you want to cover now.
There are a couple of great questions from the audience here, and I'm so grateful that folks are paying attention and throwing their questions in. One question about travel. Are you limiting business travel to just essential business, or are you starting to relax your travel rules? This is so variable depending on your state requirements, but how are people handling business travel? It was funny, this summer, I had so many clients that were jumping on the opportunity for clients to meet with, folks over the golf course, golfing suddenly. Golf courses must have had a banner summer from my perspective.
They did, for sure. They did.
So that's not necessarily travel, but business meetings. I think there was a huge run on golf courses. But what's been your experience with travel? Have you relaxed rules? Are you rigidly following the state requirements, or are you just banning it altogether? How are you handling business travel? And let's start with you, Teresa. Do you guys have much travel among your states, or?
Yeah, we have not relaxed any of our business travel. And I will say, as far as our protocols, we're more strict than CDC, so we have not relaxed any of that. And we have had some pushback on that.
Yeah.
Well, and especially as it relates to quarantine and then payment for that. How do I use my time if I have to come back and I take a 2-week vacation and I go away and then I come back on a personal level, right? And I quarantine. How am I going to be paid if you're requiring me to quarantine? But that's on the personal side. But as far as business, we haven't relaxed.
And how about you, Paul? Have you guys? I know travel is a regular part of your culture. What have you guys done about that?
We basically have a sort of only essential business travel, but that has, I would say that initially that was very strictly applied. We've become less strict about it over time and with experience. One of the big challenges we have, actually, which I have not involved you in, you've been involved in some of our travel thing, that. But we have these fancy machines we buy for our plants in Virginia and in California from the Japanese, and we have a new one we're trying to commission. They need to send people from Thailand and from Japan over to commission it, and we've had to jump through all sorts of hoops to get those people here and get them working and then get them home again. But we have definitely drastically limited travel in the company. Our salespeople don't get out on the road as much nearly as they used to. Our executives that go from plant to plant on a regular basis are still doing it to a degree, but much less than they had. And we're having to, deal with these crazy travel restrictions that vary by state whenever we do that. So I remember, trying to plan a trip for an executive to go visit our Vermont, Maine, and New Hampshire plants. So we had to have them overnight in New Hampshire. You couldn't overnight in Vermont or Maine, and then you had to go back. It was crazy. The whole thing was nuts. So, trying to keep on top of that has been, as you know, a big challenge. So.
How about you, Cathy? Are you guys doing travel to the same extent you used to? Are people going to conferences? Are you permitting salespeople to travel? What has been your decision about travel?
We really clamped down on travel. Same thing. We only essential travel, and I would tell you most through the summer nobody traveled. We didn't do anything. We just started up a little bit more now, just because out of need for the fall. We're putting in some, for example, we're putting in some new systems at some of the resorts, and we need the IT team to go. But it's, you know, as Paul was saying, it's difficult. We have to make sure that they have the test prior to coming into Maine, and then they want to test when they go home because they're worried about their families. And so we actually bought these online tests that we give to people to travel with, so that they can, and we get the results back in 36 hours so that they can have those to make sure that we're following all of the state guidelines. But if I would tell you, we've probably done not even a tenth of the travel that we used to. We're still not, only essential.
And Jennifer, any different answer for you guys? Are you continuing to clamp down on it?
We have, you know, some of our clients need us to come out, so to the client site. So we've created client protocols, which are shared with the client, and the client agrees to them. They understand what our employees are expecting for safety precautions when they arrive. And so that's worked out really well. But again, we try to limit that to essential only.
Okay. So another question that I'll throw out to the group, and I think we've already touched on this in a couple of different rounds. The question is about what are you doing to take care of your employees? And we've heard hazard pay or increase in pay for people who are having to come to work. A great suggestion on Teresa's part with a kit that goes out to families. It sounds like, Jennifer, you guys are addressing the need for people to, you know, not have to wear a mask. So you've changed how their work is configured. Cathy, it sounds like you're doing a lot of training so everyone can feel safe with your protocols. But is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you're doing that's specifically geared towards sort of meeting the needs of your employees during this really challenging time? Because we do hear so much about what employees are struggling with. Is there anything else that's sort of innovative or different that you've done that's been successful that you'd share as kind of the best practice? And let's start with you, Teresa.
Yes, we do surveys every other month. We call them pulse surveys. So we actually changed up the questions to make those COVID surveys, and we asked our employees. And it was interesting what we got from our employees. A response was, you know, they wanted to make sure that they had communication, the importance of communication for from our CEO to our senior leaders to their leadership. So what we really did was we created a lot more opportunities for them to communicate. So we have listening tours that we're doing all via Zoom. We have virtual town halls that our CEO does. We actually even have a service awards that we do every year, and we did that virtually. So we videotape folks. We tried to figure out ways to how do we keep employees engaged, because people are feeling isolated. And when people start to feel isolated, your world gets very small and you start to worry about a lot of things. I think our decisions not to do furloughs and layoffs really helped big picture. So people were not as concerned and worried about their jobs. So that really helped. We continue to provide communications on a regular basis, everything from, you know, what might help them for EAP, benefits, what is available on a local basis, websites, information for them relative to mental health, well-being. But what they really want to know is what are the decisions that we're making? How is the organization doing financially? Are we stable? And think about it. So, you know, originally, from the governor's decision, we could not provide for many weeks essential services to patients even. So that did have an impact to our financial situation. So people were saying it's great that, you know, you're not going to furlough and lay off, but what is our financial situation? So they wanted to hear from us, and we've done that virtually in many different forums. We also actually, our executive management team initiated huddles. So we have daily huddles where we discuss the COVID issues of the day and what are we going to do about them. So our decision-making has gotten a lot tighter, a lot quicker, which has resulted in a lot more communication more regularly across the organization. So those things have really helped to support our employees being less anxious and feeling better about things.
That's great. And relatively simple to provide communication. I mean, you have to be attentive to it, but it's not a dollar item.
Yes.
And how about you, Jennifer? You've already said some great things about how you've been responsive to employees. Is there anything else that you guys have done that you have found to be successful?
We started a speaker series. And so we brought in Travis Mills a couple weeks ago as a motivational speaker, which was a really great way to have our employees come together, because again, we're trying to make sure we're providing opportunities for people to be able to come together around a common topic, have conversations, socialize. We have another one coming up next week around mental health. And with that, we're piloting a pretty cool program called Restore Resilience. And we hope to be able to roll that out to our employees. It's a 12-week program that has a personal coach, and you connect on either through text or through video. They help with nutrition, with anxiety, with depression, with whatever's going on with you that may be causing anxiety or depression. And I think that those are the types of things that we probably would not have thought about, right, to offer, and they will be really helpful and useful. And it's just something a little bit different. Like Teresa, we're doing town halls, we're doing regular communications. Each of our teams are getting together virtually in various, either social or professionally, to talk about things. But, it goes back to my original comment. It just feels so artificial at times. And so how do we try to create that in-person feeling virtually?
We have one client that had a great idea around this. They're offering some very high-end pumpkin carving expert that's doing a program, and they're sending out kits with some stencils and some carving equipment to everybody who signs up. They've made it available to employees and also to vendors. And I thought that's a great idea with kids. You can think of families who are just looking for something to keep their kids busy now have a really fun pumpkin carving opportunity. So people have gotten creative, which is great. Paul, any other, you've already said a lot about what you guys have done for your employees, and it's all impressive. Is there anything else that you didn't get a chance to share?
I sort of echo a little bit what others have said. We've got much more regular and frequent communication that goes out to our employees. In my small group that I manage, we have twice a week phone calls where we make sure that we're all together and we know what everyone else is doing. And there's been a lot more of that generally throughout the company. So a lot of it is about connection and staying connected and making sure people know that there are others here for them if they need it.
And how about you, Cathy? Anything else you would add as far as specifically focused on supporting employees?
Pretty much what everybody's saying. And if you ask the individual resorts, they're all doing things. But one thing that we did as a corporate, we send out two weekly newsletters, a safety one, and we send out a wellness newsletter. And we pivoted our safety newsletter to be called the Weekly Supporter. And we weren't just sending it to the people that were working at the time. We were sending it to all of those people that had gotten laid off or that were at home or that are seasonal employees. And so I have a really brilliant young woman who puts this together, Tori, and we were sending a weekly supporter that would have things like self-care on it, tips for self-care, tips for homeschooling. She even had something on how to homeschool your child, keeping home a happy place, how to help with stress and anxiety. And we had all kinds of links and places that people could go. So I think people appreciated that. Now that we were operating pretty more fully, we switched it back to the safety message. But I think, just as everyone said, communicating and over communicating was huge.
Okay, great. One other question from the audience, and then I'll turn it over to Katy. This is a great question about masks and really the conundrum of multiple states. So have you, in terms of mask use, have you defaulted to the state variations, or are you adopting a consistent requirement? And in particular around things like, if you can socially distance, are you requiring masks? That's, some municipalities require masks. So are you defaulting to that as a standard practice, or are you allowing the variations in states to dictate your usage. And I'll just toss that up to anybody. I mean, Teresa, you've already said you're now mandating masks across the board. That would be regardless of what the local requirements are. That's sort of a patient complaint-based decision. Are there anybody else want to tackle if you're standardizing or not standardizing in particular with respect to masks?
So sure, I mentioned that we lifted the mask use while you're working in your queue, but anytime you're moving around our office space, absolutely a mask is required.
Okay.
And that's what we do too. I mean, we basically, if you can't socially distance, or if you're moving out around in common areas or spaces, then you need to have a mask on.
So you're doing that, you're sort of standardizing to that level, which is a common sense level, even if you're not required to do that in your jurisdiction.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've caught up with the questions, Katie, so I'll turn it over to you.
There's actually another one here that's really interesting that I'm going to throw out to the group, and it kind of piggybacks on the one that you asked, not from the audience, Suzanne. And this attendee says that they've recently read about how COVID is disproportionately impacting women in the workplace, with more women opting to leave their jobs just because of the challenges of supervising kids with remote learning, childcare issues. And the question is whether this is something that you've noticed, and whether there's anything that your companies are doing to support families in particular, other than communicating, which you've all talked a lot about, sort of providing tips, so that employees, and in particular female employees, but any employees who have primary sort of family responsibilities, don't have to leave. And I will share that I've seen some interesting things among clients here. I have worked with a client that provides a stipend to employees to be used for a tutor, which could help for families that have kids who don't require childcare necessarily, but might require a parent to help with the education. So that could help. And I've also seen I have at least one client that facilitates childcare to make it possible for employees to continue working. I won't go through. Any of you have anything to add on that point?
Sure, that was, huge for us at Baker Newman Noyes. We quickly realized that parents, they became teachers, they became tech support, while trying to take care of their children, still pay attention to their partner or spouse, and then work, right? And so it just became a lot. And so what we did, two things. We asked people, just put on your calendar to block out family time. So if you need to be teacher or daycare, then put it out there so we know. And then being able to flex your day. What we were concerned about there's only 24 hours in the day. And if our parents were working 20 hours between being teacher, tech support, employee, that's too much. And so we really encouraged people to be working with their mentors and with their partners about what kind of flexible schedule did they need to be able to make it through. And it comes down to communication. It's just letting people know what you need, asking for what you need. And then our parent group has been fabulous. And so parents come together once a month and come up with just great ideas. And one of the fabulous ideas was, maybe if you have family members outside of the state who could do a video call during meetings for you and schedule that in, to have the cousin phone call every day at 1 o'clock so you can run your team meeting or something like that. And so, I think parents were able to have that space to come together just to say, what are you guys doing? And just to share the resources that they had found for themselves to help ease it. But I think as employers, you have to be flexible with your employees, because this is just unusual times where sometimes from day to day, you just don't know what may come that they are having to deal with. So communication is really the key.
Anyone else have anything on that point? That's helpful. Great. Well, we've talked a lot about telecommuting already, and I think we have a good sense of which of you are likely to return to in the workplace work as soon as you can. And I heard Cathy say that for Boyne, remote work may be more the norm. Are there other things beyond the telecommuting issue, whether it's technology, travel, just some change that you've had to make to accommodate the pandemic that you either expect to stick around post-pandemic or that you can't wait to throw out the window and are sure you're going to revert back to the way it was done? Teresa, can you think of anything along those lines? Or is telecommuting is the big one? And we have
absolutely. I mean, we've done surveys around that. It would be of no surprise, more than 50% of those who are currently remote workers want to stay. It's probably closer to 70% want to stay as remote workers. I will say, what I would like to see stay is the innovation, the adaptation, the agility, the flexibility that we've seen with all the new work that we've had and ideas. And in fact, whether it's testing tents, the new acute respiratory clinics, the workflows relative to that, we had we have an annual achievement plan. The people goal was time saved. And that was obviously something we put in place way before the, COVID-19 and pandemic. And the threshold for that goal was 30,000 hours. And we thought, well, we're never going to be able to even make threshold, and certainly target was 60,000. And what we found was our employees who were working remote, guess what? They changed up their work. They ended up saving a lot of time. They ended up submitting hours, and we're already we're well over threshold and probably going to hit target. So a lot of people's both ingenuity, looking at their work, how could they adapt, how could they do it differently, and a lot of energy and rallying around that. So that's something we really want to keep, this quick decision-making, the constant iterations of something. If it's not working, let's try something different. Let's fail forward fast. So those are things we want to keep. I don't know what will happen with remote workers. What I will say, I think I'm relatively confident that it's certainly going to be more than the 70 we had pre-COVID that will continue to work remotely.
Yeah, it does feel like post-COVID, the sort of excuse that we've always done it this way, so that's why it has to be done this way. It does feel like that's got to be out the window to some extent. Yes. for any organization, just because we've proven that necessity sort of will make things happen. Anyone else have anything else to add on that point?
My view, sorry,
Paul.
My view is that we'll have a lot fewer meetings and more of these kind of meetings, remote things. We're not going to substitute all of them, certainly, but it'll have to be a pretty good reason to get people to travel a long way and get them in a room together.
Yep, that's a good point. Kathy, did you have something to add, or was that Jennifer? Kathy.
No, I was going to add that we've really started using Teams. So we've always been somewhat remote and all over the place, but we've started using Teams for most of our calls, and it's been huge. And we're implementing it before this whole thing started in about June. But the fact that we can have team meetings and do this kind of thing and see people and see people's faces and see them. I do all my one-on-one calls now, and I used to just do them on the phone, and I don't know why we never thought about, we didn't have Zoom, but now I can look the person that's in Michigan in the face and have a conversation. And also we usually do a yearly meeting with all the executive team in Michigan, and they're the only ones that are really at the meeting. And this year we did all the presentations through Teams so that every senior team member of every resort could participate. So now we had hundreds of people participating in a meeting that used to just be maybe 50. So I think that type of thing we will continue to do and be able to involve more people. And I think we're all learning that we can work pretty efficiently using that Teams.
Right. And then this next question, I'm just going to direct to Paul, because I've heard a rumor that Hood has in fact developed a resource or tool that's been really valuable for employees. And that was a question. Have you created any kind of a resource or tool that's been really valuable in this? And I understand, Paul, you guys have created something.
Well, yeah, we had all these policies, right? And we came out with all these policies, and they were sort of be a flurry of them. We put them into a book. So we have a whole guidebook on COVID that is on our portal and that people can access, and we sent to everybody. I think we mailed it home to everyone, actually, I think about it. And so, you know, it spells out all of our protocols and all the things we're doing to protect people and make sure we can continue to operate. And so that was something that we did, and it was a pretty big undertaking, but I think was greatly appreciated by everyone involved. It really it added a lot of transparency to everything we were doing in the company, which with 3,000 different employees, it spread around. It's important to have that.
And so that went out to literally every employee, so they have access to, that's great.
Right.
I hope this is the last pandemic, but
yeah, I hope so.
The next one you're going to, if there is one, you'll have just, you know.
In my lifetime anyway.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Turn it back to Suzanne.
The next one is about testing, and I think this is, we've heard a little bit about testing. I know some people do screening testing on the way in, maybe everybody does that. So the question really is both about what are you doing for screening? Are you asking the symptom related questions or the exposure related questions? Are you taking temperatures? But then also, what are you doing about actual COVID-19 testing? Are you, if you are doing testing, are you doing PCR testing, antigen testing? Are you requiring people to test before they come back to work if they've been on quarantine? Like, what is your testing protocol? And then beyond that, what do you have any great apps? I've been working with clients on various screening symptom screening apps, and I know there's a few out there, but if you have a favorite app or technology product that helps with your testing protocol, let us know that. So let's start with you, Cathy. What do you do as far as testing, both symptom, you know, temperature stuff, but also testing specifically for COVID-19?
Well, that's a loaded question. All the states that we're in. That's something that's been one of my biggest challenges. We are doing the health checks, and we've been using a Microsoft form that we developed so that it can be online. So we have been doing that. We haven't gone to the app. I know that they're out there, but my fear is that those people that don't take it seriously, letting them do it on their own, we still want to have people, us look at them in the eye in the morning and say, how are you feeling? So we are using some technology for that, but not an app. As far as testing, it is, if there's a case, well, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to have everybody have a test prior to entering into our employee housing, so that we do a lot of employee housing so that we can feel like we at least start out with having everybody tested. As far as having a COVID case, for a while in Michigan, we had an organization that was coming on property once a week to each of our resorts and doing testing, and we just had anyone volunteer to go get a test. And this was testing for antibodies, and it was also testing to the COVID actual test. And we did have quite a few people that do it, but then they got backed up, and the results started taking 7 to 10 days. So then we also figured out if there are some situations where we need test results much quicker. So I mentioned earlier that we've been purchasing these Let's Get Checked online tests that come out of New York, and they have a lab in LA, and you overnight it, and it's a nasal test that you can do on your own, and it's very effective. It's FDA authorized, and so we've been using a lot of those if we have a situation at our resort where we need to know quickly, and that's helped us stop the spread. So we've been doing that at all the resorts, and that's also the test I was talking about that we carry with us when we're traveling. And then as far as just trying to do testing for the winter, right now I'm working with NSAA, and they have a line of some testing in Colorado that we could do in much bigger bunches, like 44 people at a time, and a test take 45 minutes. And because we're feeling like we need to be able to rapid test, and we can't wait the 7 to 10 days. Montana doesn't have great testing. It's taking them a long time. So I'm going around right now trying to figure out how, if we have an outbreak, how we're going to get our people at our resorts tested, because we're talking about hundreds of people, as you know, and it's south very quickly. So it's a really hot topic for us right now, and we're doing the best we can to get the most efficient testing at all of our states.
You know, it's interesting to me. I have a son in college and he's getting tested 3 times a week at his college, and they're getting test results back in less than 24 hours, and they're PCR tests, and they're all done at the health center. And so there are some people who really have figured this whole thing out. And I know it's expensive, but that does seem, for large crowds, Cathy, I wonder if you should talk with a college, figure out how
Well,
they.
that's who we're working with. The University of Colorado. That's who we're working with, and we're trying to get their tests. It's $39 a test right now. So, but that's kind of what we're doing. But it's not feasible for us to just test everybody every week. Obviously, that's just not feasible for us to test 12,000 people. But we do want to be able to test if somebody has an outbreak or somebody, you know, through contact tracing, somebody's been exposed. We want to be able to rapidly test.
Yeah, that's
so
great.
That's where we're going. Mm-hmm.
And how about you, Jennifer? What testing do you guys do?
So we have a health assessment that is mandatory upon coming into the office. And so that pops up the minute you log into the network. And so we have employees that are complying with that. And beyond that, if someone calls, like I got a call yesterday, a woman who had been in the office who now has some symptoms. She thought it might just be a cold, but she went and got tested anyway. And so our protocol there is we just ask people not to come into the office and follow the CDC on that. And so because we have so many people working at home, unlike Cathy, we don't have to worry about testing at this point. We just ask people to go through the checklist and make sure they're healthy upon entering the office. And then in the event that they were in the office and then they come up with some symptoms, they contact me and we run them through our protocols in the event that we would have to inform other employees if there was a potential exposure.
So I love that idea of having it tied to when you're first signing into the system. Is one of the questions for someone to record their temperature, or is it just symptoms?
So there's the checklist of all the things that have come from the CDC. So we ask that you take your temperature before you leave. So when you come in, you can say, yes, I have followed the BNN protocol. Kind of like Paul, we went out with a whole policy and tools and protocol around how to manage now in the world of COVID-19 and trained everyone on what we were expecting if you were to come into the office.
And Paul, how about you guys? I know you're doing symptom testing, screening for your folks in the manufacturing facilities. Are you doing any other testing, or are you requiring COVID-19 tests, or what's your position been on that?
We're not requiring testing. We're not doing testing ourselves. We're using an app that APN, I think it's called APPIAN, I believe, is people who are coming into the office have to every morning go on there, and it basically you have to certify that you're symptom free and that you don't, and that you've had a temperature taken within the last hour that is below 100. So we've done things like that. All the entry points to our offices, we have the temperature guns and we have wipes and all the other stuff, the protective stuff's coming in. So if people haven't been able to take their temperature before coming to work, they can do it at the door to get in. But we haven't tested. We've relied on people to get tests externally for clearance to come back to work and things like that.
I know that there are some employees who are just adamantly opposed to getting a COVID-19 test. They think it's uncomfortable. They think it's an invasion of their privacy. So I hope you guys don't run into that issue, but that's
I have not heard that we have, so hopefully we have not.
Yeah. And then Teresa, how about you? I think you've spoken a little bit about your symptom screening. Do you require your delivery system folks to get tested for COVID-19?
We don't do any testing. I think, as we think about, we see patient, health and employee health very different. We don't have employee health here. We believe that, we really don't have the infrastructure. If we're thinking about the robust care, we believe that's tied to testing. So if we did that, it would involve us notifying employees of the results, providing medical advice about what to do. It's a pretty big administrative burden. I think the other issue related to is a frequency. Once you start, you have to continue to do it. And so we have decided that other than like what Paul said, if we have people that have been exposed as far as being out on quarantine, we do the contact tracing, and as far as people being out and coming back, that's where the testing would take place, but that all happens with them in their primary care doctor, which may, employees may have a primary care doctor here outside of our network at Martins Point. We are just getting ready to launch Everbridge. That is the app that we've chosen to use. So we've done a lot of research on it. It's been a collaboration between HR and IT. So it involves, as others were saying, the CDC protocols about temperature, health checking, travel, exposure, all of that. So we're just getting ready to launch that. We've had really inconsistent paper protocols around that, but we did decide, I think, short-term for COVID, longer term for, God forbid, any other type of virus, and a communication tool with our employees. We intend to use it in future state for, weather alerts and all kinds of different ways of communicating with our employees. So we just announced that today as well. I will say we've had a great collaboration we established a clinical advisory team for our employees. So that's been an effort between HR and our providers, and this Everbridge tool, which has been a great collaboration between HR and IT. So we're seeing ourselves collaborate in ways across the organization that we've never seen before. I also want to add that we established a COVID dashboard, which is something we've been using at the EMT level. We review it every Monday. It includes everything from employee cases to quarantines, to how many people have been out on leave, to contact center information about how it's impacted our business with ASAs and how many call volumes, information around patients. So we now have this dashboard that we review every Monday as an EMT to then make decisions around. We feel very proud of the fact that we've only had 7 employees who have tested positive during this whole time. And we do believe it's the protocols that we put in place and really the diligence and persistence around ensuring safe environment for our employees. So we're very proud of that.
Well, you should be. That's impressive. All right, I'll turn that over to you, Meg, I guess.
Okay. Well, before I ask the final question, I'm wondering if there are any participant questions that we haven't touched on.
There is one question that's interesting. How have people been announcing employee terminations?
Like layoffs or
layoffs, or people, you're not in the office, so it's hard for people to see, oh, that office is dark, nobody's in there anymore. There's you might not even know that people have left the organization. Has anybody been figuring out how to announce it? It's usually something you don't want to do too much communicating about, but how have people been keeping your employees updated about departures?
We don't usually announce them when they happen normally, so we're not announcing them now either. So people just have to find out as they find out.
Yeah, I think that's probably, as an employment lawyer, I think that's probably the right answer.
Yeah, I don't think you'd advise us to be announcing things like that.
Although I hear the point, right? I mean, it is a little weird. You might have 4 months go by and someone's like, wait, they left. I didn't even know they left. So I
thought they were working at home, right?
Exactly. And this is a great question. I actually am really curious about the answer to this. So the question is, looking ahead to the day when there is going to be a vaccine, and I think we're all extremely hopeful about that. What are your thoughts about mandating it? Is everyone going to be mandating? We're doing a lot more policies this year of mandating flu vaccines. And, of course, with the typical medical and religious accommodations as needed, but I definitely see employers more willing to jump into that fray than they have been in the past. What are you thinking about in terms of mandating vaccines, and are we all ready for that? Cathy, let's start with you. Are you planning ahead for mandating vaccines?
Well, I can't see us mandating it. I could see us we have flu shot clinics now. I could see us bringing it on site. Haven't really thought about the mandate, just because I know there's so many people that feel strongly about flu shots. I don't know how that would go, but I think we would strongly encourage it. I think our executive team, we would be mandated, because we're mandated to have flu shots, but we haven't done that throughout the whole organization, but we always have flu clinics and we highly recommend it. So flu shot clinics. So I would think we do the same thing.
How about you, Paul? Have you thought about whether
We've discussed it. We actually discussed mandating flu shots this year, but we decided against. I don't think we're going to do it. I think we're going to strongly recommend it and probably make it available to our employees on site to the extent we can once it is available to us. But I don't see us forcing people to do it. Especially, I think something like more than 30% of the population of the United States has indicated they don't want to, for various reasons, don't want to get vaccinated. So I don't know how we can mandate that and face that kind of, percentage of people who don't want to do it.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Jennifer, how about you guys? Have you thought about that?
I think this will be a great question to ask us in about a year when we know a lot more about this. But no, we have not discussed that at Baker Newman Noyes, but we do offer, like Cathy, and encourage people to get a flu shot. So we're running flu shot clinics right now, and had to get very creative about how we're running flu shots in this environment. But that's about as far as we've discussed at Baker Newman Noyes.
And Teresa, I imagine you might have a different answer in your delivery group. What do you envision as far as mandating the COVID-19 vaccine if and when it becomes available? And nobody wants to take the first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine, right?
No.
People want to wait a few months and see what happens. But so we don't want to mandate it too early. But what are your thoughts, Teresa, about, especially in your delivery of healthcare system?
Right. Well, it's interesting because on our senior leadership team, we have 4 medical doctors that sit on that team. And they have said, absolutely no way will we have COVID vaccine, mandatory or otherwise. So, I think this is a issue with the, medical profession around the amount of time needed to develop a vaccine and to have it effective. So they are very strong right now. Absolutely not would we ever have mandate relative to that for our employees, nor do they believe that this first round of vaccine is any vaccine that anyone should take. So it's been quite a strong voice. We do have, voluntary flu shots that we're doing. We've had, I think 600 of our employees have so far had, flu shots. We do clinics, we do them in the delivery system. Other people log on as well if they've had them done outside our system. But as far as COVID, it will be interesting to see a year from now. So far, we're hearing absolutely not, Teresa.
Well, that's really important information. That makes this whole program worthwhile, Teresa. Thank you.
All right, well, we're going to wrap up here. We've been talking about vaccines, looking forward to those. I want you to look into the future a little bit more to the next pandemic and what you would tell your successor to what you wished you knew before this started, or what you would tell your successor in your position they need to be doing to prepare for the next pandemic. Start with Teresa.
I just say the importance of adaptation, flexibility, and agility and iteration. Don't be afraid to make decisions. Don't be afraid to iterate on those decisions. Communication is paramount. Trust and engagement, all those things that we talk about with our culture that, we know is so important. Keep those going. Engagement is critically important, whatever it is you do. If it's pumpkin carving, we have Pi Day that we're going to continue to have, whether it's virtual town halls, make sure that you're communicating with your employees and, pay attention to those things like fairness, employees' perceptions, continue to do surveying. That two-way dialogue and communication is really important to understand what's on people's minds and what they both admire about what you're doing and where they feel you're falling short. That information is valuable to be able to continue to provide support to them.
Thanks. Jennifer?
I think here it would have been being able to have the time and awareness to know how long this was going to go for and the impact to our employees' mental health. And so I wished we would have had programs in place, been more prescriptive about connecting with people and checking in. I think that mental health is something that we don't often like to talk about, you know, and now that we're starting to see the impact of this pandemic and the numbers of mental health disorders going up and people really struggling, I wish we would have had more resources in place and been more aware to push those out sooner. Unfortunately, with all the other pieces we had to pay attention to with new policies and ergonomics and sending equipment out and all the operational issues, that one got pushed down the list. And next time that would be at the top of the list.
Good thought. Thanks. Paul?
I mean, for me, I would say being sure that you communicate regularly and clearly with everyone and do that as much as you can. I mean, I think we initially didn't do enough, then we did too much, and we sort of scaled back a little bit. It was sort of calibrating that level of communication was important. That and don't underestimate the ability of people to adapt and make do and do their thing. I think we were all worried when we went out we were going to be terribly unproductive and nothing was going to get done, and yet I think we've been pleasantly surprised in that regard.
Great. And Cathy?
Well, I agree with what most everyone said. I would say that the only other thing I would add is empathy, is just to continue to really be aware of the anxiety and how people are feeling, and just to listen and be empathetic and to be kind and try to understand where everyone's coming from, because I think that would really help us out, would have helped us out if we were more aware and just had a better understanding of really how people were going to be affected by this and how they were going to feel about it. So empathy.
Great. That's a good note to end on. I do want to thank all of our guest panelists for your insight and your thoughts and your wisdom. It's been really educational and interesting. And so thank you for participating, and thank you to our audience.